Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club. For March, we read Hilary Mantel's novel Wolf Hall, and it was a reread for me. I've read this a few times, and I was very pleased to hear how many of you enjoyed it. How many of you, in fact, have had it sitting on your shelf staring at you for a long time, and you finally decided to take it down and read it, and realize how strange and weird and really good it is. And for reasons that I'm not quite clear on, I set the reading schedule so that we ran out of Wolf Hall before we ran out of month. And so we have this extra weekend where we're done with the novel. I imagine some of you are still finishing it, but we're mostly done with the novel. And we still have a bit of March to go. So I thought I would take this opportunity to do some supplementary reading suggestions for you for Wolf Hall. I have said a few times that you only need a tiny bit of grounding to get this book. You do not need to read a ton of books like the ones I'm going to recommend now before you read this, because it's a really effective novel. And a really effective novel will not need you to do that. But afterwards, it's almost a certainty that your interest will be aroused. And so I wanted to show you some recommendations of some aspects of, of this book. We won't go into anything in great depth, but the first recommendation that I want to make is a biography of Thomas Cromwell. Obviously, since he's the central narrative viewpoint of the whole book, you're going to want to wonder, well, okay, what was he really like? Hilary Mantel is a really skilled novelist, but she is writing fiction, which means she has a narrative agenda. And here you might be expecting that I'm going to recommend a turn of the 20th century biography as a work of, deep scholarship and whatnot. But biographies are constantly being rewritten of key figures, and sometimes the right person comes along at the right time to write a masterpiece. And so I'm going to recommend a modern book. Diarmaid MacCulloch's gigantic biography of Thomas Cromwell is incredible. Has a cover blurb from Hilary Mantel, but it is an incredible work. It is gigantic, it's encyclopedic, it's twice as long as the next biggest Cromwell biography from the turn of the 20th century, and it's also eloquent. This biographer has a very dry, deadpan sense of humor that crops up everywhere, even in the grimmest of moments, and Cromwell's story is full of grim moments. He is sort of we mentioned in our read-along of Wolf Hall that Robert Bolt, in his play A Man for All Seasons, makes Thomas More a perfect saintly figure. And we mentioned that Hilary Mantel very much does not like that figure. She very much wants to take a sledgehammer to it in the course of the Wolf Hall books, especially the novel Wolf Hall. What I didn't stress as much, because it becomes only much more obvious in later books in this trilogy, is that she doesn't want to knock Thomas More off that pedestal and leave the pedestal empty. She wants to knock him off and put Cromwell up there. He doesn't belong up there. He was a ruthless, jumped-up, bloodthirsty henchman. And so, if you were feeling a little of that and you want a big biography, this is out in paperback now. It's out in hardcover. It's definitely available. It's almost certainly at your bigger library, or if you have a university library nearby, it's almost certainly there. And it is well worth your time. It is not a big, fat, dry, stately thing. This is a very entertaining author to read. Then we'll move on to another biography, a biography of a figure that is present in Wolf Hall and gets more present in Bring Up the Bodies and is much more present in The Mirror and the Light, the final book in the series. And that is the poet Thomas Wyatt. And Nicholas Schulman did a biography of him, Graven with Diamonds, that is really, really good. This is a really good, insightful biography of Wyatt and his time. And Cromwell is all over this. So in addition to Diarmaid MacCulloch, you want another biographer, another area of focus. Wyatt isn't really, you're not going to have any questions about him in Wolf Hall. But the more the trilogy goes on, the more questions you are going to have about Thomas Wyatt. And this book answers them all. Then, getting back to fiction, we talked a few times about Wolf Hall is not only a great historical novel, but it became a phenomenon. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody read it. It was everywhere. It became a huge deal. It was adapted for the stage and the small screen and the large screen. It will be adapted again. And this is the sort of thing that happens periodically with Tudor historical fiction. I could take you all the way back. It goes all the way back to the beginning of historical fiction. It goes all the way back to Kenilworth by Sir Walter Scott. Periodically, there is a Tudor historical fiction that takes off. Sometimes it'll go fallow for a while, and then you'll get two right on the heels of each other. And that happened with Wolf Hall, because Wolf Hall was only 20 years or so after the last Tudor historical novel phenomenon that dealt with the same period and the same people. And I'm, of course, referring to The Other Boleyn Girl. That's the American title for The Other Boleyn Sister. And in this paperback, the paperback with this cover, this thing sold like crazy. Like crazy. Again, like with Wolf Hall, it had stage adaptations, small screen adaptations, big screen adaptations, and everybody read it and everybody talked about it. And it is good. It is very different from Wolf Hall. Very different, and also not as good. There's no way to avoid that when you read them side by side. Wolf Hall is an unbelievably moving and intelligent work of fiction. This is very good, but it's not on that level. But it's the same characters. This deals with Mary Boleyn. She is the other Boleyn girl. She is Anne Boleyn's sister, who becomes mistress to King Henry VIII and bears him a son, but requests nothing of him, requires nothing of him. She does not hold out to be queen or anything like that. She doesn't extract any promises from him, and is therefore, in the course of this novel, the source of scorn from her sister, who does hold out for those things. This is remarkable. A lot of the characters that are in Wolf Hall are in here. So I thought I would recommend it. Then when it comes to biography, we will finish up with the two figures who, more than any other, dominate Wolf Hall and especially bring up the bodies. And that is Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. And Henry VIII, of course, has been the subject of innumerable biographies. Heretically, I have always maintained that the truly great one-volume biography of Henry VIII has not yet been written. The ones that are really good on the documents are a little bit dry to read. The ones that are a little bit entertaining to read are a little bit slipshod on the documents. The ones that have an emphasis on King Henry as a warrior slack on their emphasis on King Henry as a social figure or a political figure. The ones that concentrate on him as a political figure tend to ignore his significance as a religious figure, and so on and so forth. He was a multifaceted, weird, terrifying figure, and I don't think he's had his biography yet. Even after all this time, I don't think so. But the aspect of Henry VIII that is the aspect that we see in the Wolf Hall books, we don't see every aspect. I think Hilary Mantel would say that she does show every aspect, but she doesn't. We don't see every aspect, but the aspects that we do see are really well captured in one biography, and it's this one. It's Jasper Ridley's book on Henry VIII. It's not Scarisbrick or even Francis Hackett. It's this book. This is a classic biography from Penguin. I once had this trade paperback. I'd give anything to have it now. I have a hardcover, but you can find this thing used online. And it is a really, really readable, quotable biography of the Henry that is in the Wolf Hall books. The shards of Henry that are in those books. And finally, Anne Boleyn. And with Anne Boleyn, there really isn't any but one choice for a biography. There's all sorts of fiction. Susanna Dunn wrote a great novel about Anne Boleyn called The Queen of Subtlety. But when it comes to a biography, it's Eric Ives. It's the Life and Death. Can you make that out here? The light is starting to uncooperate. The Life and Death of Anne Boleyn. This is an older book, but it is absolutely definitive and very, very good. Brilliantly written. And it will tell you everything that you need to know about this still slightly enigmatic character. And it dispenses with a lot of the speculation that has arisen around Anne Boleyn. Is this be any better over here? No, oh my God, even worse. Well, it doesn't matter because we're done. So those are some recommendations for secondary reading, for follow-up reading to Wolf Hall. Now, next month, we are doing SPQR by Mary Beard, and I will be timing that a little better so that we will be talking about the book for 4 weeks in April. But April has 5 weekends. So I think next month I will also do a follow-up, a further reading video for the final week of April. So we are nevertheless going to split SPQR to 4 parts, even though the month has a little more time than that. I'll work out all that and I'll lay out the details of it in a video early this week. I just wanted to do this now because this is a question that I've been getting from lots of people who've been enjoying Wolf Hall. Lots of people who wrote me ahead of time and said, "Well, I'd love to join the STD book club, but I don't know enough about Tudor history to read this novel." And I had to tell a lot of you before this read along began that is not the case definitely read the novel. You don't need more than a sentence of preparation. And I gave it to you. The same thing is true of SPQR. I think you need a little bit of preparation to overcome that silly intimidation factor. I don't think you need it in order to read the book. But we'll talk. We'll do a little bit of preparation. We'll break down the reading schedule of the book and a little bit of preparation for what to know going into it early next week, and then we'll launch off next weekend with the first part of that. The only other suggestion that I want to make for Wolf Hall, Once Upon a Time would have been self-evident, but I will recommend it anyway. It is not historical, but it's Henry VIII by William Shakespeare. You should definitely read Henry VIII by William Shakespeare if you can't see it performed, which is unlikely. Once Upon a Time, it was the most popular Shakespeare play to be performed because it's very much a pageant play. It's very much a feast for the eye. And also, unlike a lot of Shakespeare plays, it has elaborate stage instructions. The stage directions are more than any other Shakespeare play. That helps a lot. That makes it really interesting to perform. But if you have a local theater that does Shakespeare, I doubt they would ever do Henry VIII. So there might be a performance on YouTube. I haven't actually checked. There might be something that's available that you could get from a streaming service or something like that. But you should certainly read it. I believe that Henry VIII was written to be read and not really performed. Certainly written to be enjoyed as a reading experience, which not all the plays were. And it has everything that we're seeing in the first volume of this trilogy, in Wolf Hall itself. The fall of Cardinal Wolsey is a huge part of the dramatic action of Wolf Hall, and that is a huge part of the dramatic action of Shakespeare's Henry VIII. So I would strongly advise that you read that as well. So there's a little supplementary reading for you. I'm about to get lost in the light here, so I'm going to go. And that's how we'll finish up Wolf Hall for the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club. And then we'll move on next month to SPQR. So I will see you all then. Thank you, BookTube.